Welcome to Healthy Births, Happy Babies, where we share tips, tools, and stories grounded in natural childbirth and parenting principles, so that instead of feeling overwhelmed and confused during this exciting time in your life, you feel safe, supported, and empowered in your childbirth and parenting journey. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jay Warren.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here at the CAP Wellness Center. And today we're going to be talking about floating in pregnancy. And by floating, I'm meaning a very specific term of using what they call a sensory deprivation chamber, which sounds really ominous, but basically it's either in a tank with a small amount of water, it's only a couple feet deep, but full of salts, so you are instantly buoyant, and it's at basically body temperature and in darkness, so it makes everything very neutral, and in pregnancy specifically it makes you buoyant, and the salts are really helpful for the body as well. And I've become a friend of floating myself, and in talking with the guy that runs the Float Center, it's Float North County in Solana Beach, about floating and specifically how to use it for pregnant women, he put me in touch with today's guests, and they are two midwives that own a birth center up in Alaska. Their names are Kirsten and Lena, and they're going to be talking about how they've incorporated a float tank in their own birthing center and how it's helpful for their clients during pregnancy and helping their births. So before we switch to that conversation, though, let me, as always, take a moment to take a word from our sponsor, the CAP Wellness Center.
Hi, I'm Maring Higa, and I'm the acupuncturist at CAP Wellness Center. One of the things I love about working at CAP Wellness Center is getting to be around all the brave, strong, and inspiring women. I'm always inspired by my patients' ability to rise to their challenges, overcome obstacles, and also get creative in their pursuit towards their health goals. I feel honored to be a part of their journey, whether it's helping them to start a family, have a healthy pregnancy, or helping them through their postpartum recovery.
All right, so let me introduce our guests, and we can switch over to our conversation about floating. So Kirsten Gerrish and Lena Kilic are midwives, owners of the Heritage Birth Center, and owners of Float Alaska, the state's largest float center. Their philosophy of birth, mother-led care, is working to change the paradigm around birth. Believing that everyone deserves exceptional care in their pregnancy, they introduced floating into their practice in 2015 and have been thrilled with the results. Float Alaska has grown into the wellness center offering EFT, hypnosis, and massage, all with a focus on creating a more healthy pregnancy and healing past birth trauma. So Kirsten and Lena are definitely authorities on floating in pregnancy. I saw their talk at a float conference just recently, and I'm really happy to bring them on so they can share this information with you. So now let me switch over to our conversation with Kirsten and Lena. All right, Lena, Kirsten, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
We're great. It's nice to be here.
Thank you for having us.
God, yeah, well, it was actually Brian, who runs the float place here in Solana Beach, that put me in touch with you. I've been a floater for about a year. I love it. I love the benefits of it. And, working here in the prenatal center just made sense of, wow, if I could be out of gravity for a while, I'm pretty sure my pregnant woman would like that as well. And I talked more and more with him. He didn't have as many details as I was looking for. And so he pointed me in your direction. And I watched your talk that you gave at the conference just recently, and I'm really happy that you're taking your time to be here to share this world for our pregnant patients. And it's amazing what you're doing with your birth center, so I want you to tell that story. We just heard your bio. We heard a little bit about it, but tell me about your paths and how, one, you got into midwifery, and then also how the center came about.
Sure.
So I was practicing already as a home birth midwife for about 10 years before Lena and I met each other. That was when Lena decided she wanted to be a midwife. So she decided one day to be a midwife. And I think I met her 2 days later.
I know. That's how I roll. That's how things often go. So I was apprenticing with Kirsten and asked her if she'd ever thought of opening a birth center. And her answer was a resounding, nope, no way, never. Unless, and she had this list of qualifiers that she needed met. It needed to be the specific barn that was renovated, the specific price, and only the square footage we wanted. So I just, on a spur of the moment call, phoned the landlord and then was able to call Kirsten back and say, okay, we got it.
Got it. And literally like 6 months later, we had a licensed birth center. About the time we're signing on that lease, Lena's having her first baby.
Yeah.
Like a year and a half later, we decided to do it again. Opened another birthing center in Anchorage this time, in a beautiful 1950s home in downtown Anchorage, because we had to have something super cozy and nice to match our barn, our colony barn out in the valley. Yeah, and then,
I was pregnant again. It was like 2 years after that. So we figured, there's probably another birth center on the way, and got contacted about a birth center in Soldotna, which is about 3 hours away, and went down telling ourselves, we're just going to talk. We don't know. And an hour later, again, we had the keys to our third birth center. So we've had a very, very busy practice taking care of a lot of moms. And what we found we really needed to kind of cover this broad distance and all these different midwives taking care of these moms was a really cohesive philosophy of birth. So that's how we came to mother-led care, which really, the emphasis is on taking the best care of these moms and babies as we can, and supporting the midwives who are doing that as well, which is floating was the natural next step to that.
Right. Because you can't ask care providers to be the best care provider possible and offer all that informed consent unless they're the best people they can be. And in that vein, we went down to Portland to meet with another midwife that owned 3 birthing centers. We thought, okay, maybe she can teach us some things.
I know, she's got to have it figured out.
She's got to know the secret to this crazy. We'd grown in 5 years from really just the 2 of us to 25 people. And we felt like, oh my gosh, we've got to get our feet underneath us. And we did. We had this night where, well, what are we going to do? And I thought, well, if anybody has this thing called floating, I don't even know what that is, they must in Portland.
Portland is everything.
Portland. And Float On said, we called and they said, well, you can come float at 2 a.m. or 7 a.m. We chose 7 a.m. And we walked out of there just like our minds were blown.
Right.
Like, that's why we went to Portland. I really feel that in the end, it wasn't to meet with that other birth center owner. It was to find this new therapy that was going to be so wonderful for us as care providers and for our community.
And that's really, we came to floating, but once we got here, it was like, of course, floating was invented for the pregnant woman, is, really for all of the aches and pains and ailments it resolves. How nice that we offer it to everybody in the community, but it is so well suited for pregnancy that it was such a natural fit, and we haven't looked back. We've just kept expanding the number of float tanks and how we're able to offer that to our moms.
Yeah.
And so with a new mom that's coming through and, getting ready for her birth and then sees these things off to the side and like asking like, what's going on in there? How do you, how do you just,
We're like, so this other thing that we have,
I know.
And all of our moms get a free float. They all get a free float, and we also offer them 2 free half-hour massages, because we recognize that women don't take care of themselves. They don't give themselves that space and that time to relax. So we wanted to just plant that seed. Yes. And we're using the float tank for more than just stress relief for these moms. The other day, we asked a mom to go in, and because you can lay on your stomach in a float tank when you're fully 40 weeks pregnant, and her baby turned. Her baby went from being totally posterior to a beautiful anterior. That back was out. And then, that evening she could go into labor. She'd been having horrible prodromal labor. So, I tell that story just to point out that it's so much more for us not just a therapy for those long-term things necessarily.
Right. Well, let's back up a second and describe for our listeners who may not even have any idea what really a float is. Can you describe like what a float tank is and what it looks like and just that whole process?
So a float tank comes in a lot of different styles, but the one thing they have all in common is they're roughly maybe 4 to 5, 8 by 8 feet. We put 800 pounds of Epsom salt in there and we dissolve it into 10 inches of water. So you're going into a fully enclosed tank with super salinated water. It's like floating in the Dead Sea. You couldn't sink even if you wanted to. And inside the tank, it's pitch black. There's no sound. There's no light. It is a wonderfully healing place to be. We have a lot of people bring concerns about being claustrophobic, but I like to remind them you're in pitch black. So it's not that the walls are closing in, it's that they're expanding. It's absolutely vast inside of there. And so, you know, we have a lot of different props that we offer our pregnant ladies so that they can really get comfortable in the tank. And then once you stop moving, your skin temperature and the water temperature are about the same degrees. So you lose the sensation of where your skin ends and the water begins. So you're really just in nothing, perfectly supported, and you can absolutely let go and relax. Maybe for the first time in weeks, fully relax your body and feel supported in the water.
It's almost the way I describe it to my pregnant patients is like a womb within the womb. The baby, like having a different experience also, you know, like you're almost like being able to connect with the baby because you're in an environment much like they are in. And it can be a really, really powerful, like connective time for mom and baby too.
Absolutely.
Do you find, so one of the things beyond the claustrophobia, one of the things moms are concerned about, at least the ones that I talk to, is that there's no way I'm going to be able to float. Like I'm just too heavy, and because they don't understand like just how salinated that water is, and the feeling, the challenge they have is not understanding it's only 10 inches of water. So if they felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to sink, you're not going anywhere.
You're not going far.
Right. With the salination, I mean, you've talked in the talks that I've listened to you about the healing effects of the salts that are in their water. Can you speak more about that?
The Epsom salts and how wonderful it is for helping to relax your muscles. And so many of us, probably most of us, are low in magnesium, and we do absorb some of it through our skin. So it's going to help with that. It's going to help with the, you know, the relaxation, the aches and pains.
It's the mother of all Epsom salt baths,
it really
right?
is, right? People come in, you know, not just pregnant ladies, but people that have just run a marathon. They'll get in that float tank and come out a new person. No more aches and pains. And, you know, just the fact that you can be so mobile in that super buoyant water. These ladies, you know, they can feel more comfortable in their body for a little while.
Yeah.
And part of what I've talked with Brian about, and also I've experienced myself floating, is that unwinding process that you're able to do. And as a chiropractor trying to unwind tension on the table, you're still in a gravity environment, especially in the third try. And so being able to be in a really sensory neutral, but it's not anti-gravity, but it's pretty close to it, that the body be able to work out some kinks that wouldn't be able to. And so movement is, you know, at least what I've heard, very encouraged, rather than you have to just kind of like lay there and float for an hour and be still.
Right?
So we provide the different props just to support the moms in a variety of positions, whether she's getting, it's feeling better to lay on her stomach and let her belly hang in the water, laying on her side, or laying on her back, which she maybe hasn't been able to do at that point in pregnancy. And one of the moms we interviewed in the talk we gave, Rachel, has had terrible scoliosis pain in all of her pregnancies. And this time when she floated, she found more relief in the float tank than she had through any other modality.
Right.
Simply, I mean, just when you take all of the pressure off of your spine and your pelvis and allowing, the effect of gravity to come off for a minute, it's amazing just how things kind of take a breath and settle down a little bit more too. Yeah, it's powerful. Moms often get out. They went in absolutely in pain and they come out like, I don't know what happened in there, but I'm grateful that it did.
Are there any like contraindications? Are there any things that might be going on with a woman that she should be sensitive to and be sure to ask about before she floats?
To me, I mean, the biggest and maybe the only thing you wouldn't want her water broken, and you don't want anybody getting into your tank that's bleeding, right? Otherwise, there really isn't a problem with a pregnant lady taking a bath. And these aren't hot baths, so get in and enjoy it. So I would say no. I say no, get in the tank. It's a beautiful thing.
Now, as midwives, like, what have you noticed as far as differences in the births with women that are floating?
Well, there's that positional difference like Kirsten was talking about, where babies, once if her, abdominal muscles are relaxing, her uterus is relaxing, and her pelvis is able to open a bit more, that gives the baby the freedom to get into a more optimal fetal position, which is then going to be associated with a better outcome with the birth, just an easier labor when the baby doesn't have to work quite so hard to get through this torqued pelvis. And then, we have worked a lot with ladies in prodromal labor, putting them into the float tank, which is helping on a few levels. There's the mental exhaustion and the physical exhaustion that go along with the prodromal labor. And if we can, get her that super saturated magnesium, and it relaxes her muscles, it lets her uterus relax, so it can stop doing this constant, ineffective contracting that's maybe been going on for days. That's absolutely a game changer.
What about with changes as far as swelling?
Oh, it's amazing for the swelling. Before we had the float tank, we would ask moms to, fill your tub up at home as deep as you can and stay in there for at least 20 minutes or go to the pool. But it works so much better than that because these ladies are in the tank for an hour and it's got the Epsom salts, right? Like you're having people, before the float tank soak their feet in a little bucket of Epsom salts.
To get the swelling
but it's amazing. And, again, like we talked about it in our talk at the float conference, even ladies, having twins with lots of swelling can go in and come out quite comfortable. It does mean that these gals, they might have to get out of the float in the middle and use the restroom, right?
Because there's so much water coming off. Yeah.
So they're putting on their robe and scurrying out and then hopping back in, but it's because it's working so well. They're really clearing all that fluid.
Jessica, who we had in the video with the twins, she works in our office as well, and she would take a picture of her feet before she went in and just an hour later when she came out, and you would swear it was months different in the pregnancy. It was incredible.
And how long would it last typically? Do you know?
It depends on where she was in her pregnancy, right? A little earlier in the pregnancy, it's going to last longer. But later, because there's multiple reasons for that swelling, is she swelling because of the position of the baby? Is, exactly what the mechanism it is that caused it in the first place. So,
because that's definitely something moms would love relief for, and knowing that could even have a chance to be able to help things would make a huge difference. And especially with positioning, being able to allow baby to nestle into its best position without any of those restrictions in the way.
Exactly.
Well, and we had these such grand plans when we opened the float tank to, we can figure out how is this going to help with blood pressure that rises or swelling, all these things. But we've decided we can't just offer the float tank. So we're still doing all of our other things, that we would normally do in addition to that. So, I mean, just to say, they're getting a whole lot of things when they have a problem. And we are really still noticing huge changes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, in a pure scientific sense, you don't know exactly which one input is, right? Yeah, and
which
that's
is
something.
Mostly around. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's mostly around the topic of hypertension, just because we can't definitively say that the float tank will lower your blood pressure, just because we don't have the science to back that up. Nobody's doing studies like this on pregnant women. Pregnant women are always treated like they're a bomb about to go off. And so we know anecdotally that magnesium orally will certainly help lower a blood pressure. And so, it reasons out that taking a float and really getting a big source of magnesium through your skin rather than orally would also help lower your blood pressure.
And totally to be relaxed for an hour.
Right.
Get that total break from everything. Of course it helps with your blood pressure. Mm-hmm. But there's no scientific study.
Sure.
It can't be real.
Yes. Well, and it's the same thing, doing Webster technique for breech turning. Usually mamas that are coming to me, they're doing lots of stuff,
Right.
And it's, as much as I'd love to take credit that it was the Webster technique that allowed the baby to turn into the position the baby wanted to go into, it's so multifactorial, you can't really tell. Just knowing that you're going to get benefit out of being peaceful for an hour is reason enough for me to recommend a lot of moms to go float.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and it really does hit so many of the common complaints. It's really anything that you come in with. Do you have headaches? Do you have restless leg? Is your blood pressure creeping up? Are you having contractions? Is your back hurting because your baby's in a funky position? I mean, literally floating helps with almost everything that walks in the door as a complaint of pregnancy. So it seems like a no-brainer then, that moms should be floating during their pregnancy and really getting ahead of these complaints before they happen.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. What about postpartum? What do you recommend after baby arrives?
Well, once again, you can't be bleeding, right, when you're going to get into the tank. So you do want to wait for that, and you do want to be healed, because any cuts or anything that you have are going to be very stingy in the Epsom salt. So you're probably not floating in those first couple of months. And then afterwards, it's a lovely thing to do.
Right, because so many of our moms they have that breastfeeding hunch from being leaned over nursing for hours on end. So to have the ability to really stretch out and put their arms above their head and let their spine kind of unwind, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and especially with healing from the birth, and even in pregnancy, I always recommend don't shave your legs before you go float.
No,
because it's very stingy. I know for me, when I was going to float, I shaved my face and just even the part of my neck that was in the water. I mean, it went away after a couple minutes, but those first couple minutes, I was like, I don't know if I can do this for a half hour or for a full hour. But then everything normalized. So in the last couple minutes that we have, tell people where they can find out more about what you're doing up in Alaska if they're listening to up there, and to your website.
Okay. You can find out about us at heritagemidwifery.com.
Heritage Birth Center.
Oh, I'm sorry. heritagebirthcenter.com. See, I don't even know where we are. It's heritagebirthcenter.com. And I was mixing the two. We're on Facebook under Heritage Midwifery.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have the correct link available in the show notes and on our website, so they don't have to worry about which one they were copied down in the car.
Sounds like there's a new web address that we need to get to.
We'll do that tonight.
And then you can find out more about our Float Center at floatalaska.net, and we're on Facebook as well as Float Alaska. And we do have our talk that we gave at the Float Conference is on our website, on the Float Alaska website. So there's a lot of good resources and info. And then we can be contacted as well through either of our websites, heritagebirthcenter.com or floatalaska.net. Kirsten and I are happy to answer any questions about floating in pregnancy or pregnancy in general.
Great. Well, thank you for, one, just being here to share that wisdom, but then also offering to our listeners as an added resource. That's really generous of you.
Absolutely.
With the last couple minutes, the last two questions, like what's the take-home message you'd like a mama listening to this, whether it's about floating or just pregnancy and birth in general? Like what kind of message would you like to share with them?
I think I'd like for all of those moms out there to understand that they have everything that they need to birth that baby, that they are super powerful and it's already all there.
That's beautiful. That's so true, too. And what little message for the baby that might be listening? I mean, sometimes the baby's listening in utero and through the belly, or, they're here and they're welcome to the world listening to this podcast through mama on their belly. What little message would you like to whisper into their ear?
We love telling these babies that their voice is going to be honored in this process and that we're listening to what they're saying and we're going to meet their needs as best we're able to.
Nice. Well, it's amazing to see like all the things you are incorporating at your birth center. So I want to acknowledge you for that, to not just, open up the doors as midwives is enough to be able to open a center for women to have a more natural, more peaceful birth than other venues. But then also to add in everything else you do is just a testament to how much you're caring and how much you really want this experience to be powerful for them. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information about this episode and other natural childbirth and parenting topics, please visit us at capwellnesscenter.com or message us on our Facebook page with any questions you might have. We here at the Cap Wellness Center look forward to helping you and your family be as happy and healthy as you can be.